Welcome back to High School Historians.
The show that still has everything to do with history, but nothing to do with high school. Thank God.
You're like, welcome, my sons?
Wait, what? God?
Who let you in here? Security!
We don't have security.
Well, then we need to make some room for it in the budget.
We don't have a budget either.
Well, then we need to get one.
Is like, now not a good time? Or like, what, dude?
Yeah, get out of here before I summon Satan.
Guys, come on, take it easy. That's not really necessary.
Oh, really? Oh, Satan!
You call
Oh my God!
Stop doing that. It hurts my feelings.
Dude, I'm like too fried to deal with this right now. I think I'm just gonna go.
So, what are you guys doing today?
We were about to talk about imperialism and its multitude of evils. But then my colleague here invoked the devil for some reason.
Oh, my Oxfordonian colleague invoked the devil for some reason. Ha ha ha, wee wee.
Oh, I hate imperialism. It was so beneficial to the world that it undermined my malevolent rule for decades.
What? How evil are you?
I mean, I am Satan.
She's got a point.
Excuse me, I would call myself more of an evil religious symbol. Even we demons value political correctness.
Oh my God!
You guys called again?
Ugh, not this again.
Cut. Just cut it. It's done. I can't deal with this.
Anyways, imperialism was a fantastic thing for imperial powers, like Britain or France, allowing them to extract raw materials and resources from their colonies, as well as selling manufactured goods back to their colonial subjects for a profit. In addition, they were able to spread their own culture to the rest of the world, which further showed their global dominance. But for the colonies themselves, it was pretty bad.
Bad? How was bringing railroads, culture, education, medicine, capital, and most importantly, civilization to the world a bad thing? Sounds like something God would do. That goody two-shoes.
Well, imperialism did bring infrastructure like railroads to its colonies. For example, in India, the British government laid down thousands of miles of railroad tracks. However, this infrastructure was built only to benefit the colonial powers themselves.
And as far as medicine goes, most imperialists only made strides in medicine for their own gain. For example, most tropical colonies had malaria, a disease transmitted through mosquitoes. Since imperialists, especially those from Europe, had never encountered malaria before, they had no medicine for the disease. By discovering that tribes in Peru use quinine from the bark of the chinchoa tree to treat malaria, French chemists purified the disease-fighting compound for use in pills. These quinine pills were then mass-produced for the consumption of European imperialists. In general, most things that imperial nations supposedly did to benefit their colonies was most importantly beneficial to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it.
I guess it sure is a good thing that they found that quinine or quinine or whatever, because then they could keep their imperialist fevers down.
Right. So even though imperialism significantly benefited those who practiced it by gaining cultural, political, and economic power, its colonies were tremendously harmed by both the destruction of traditional cultures, the creation of divisive ethnic rifts, and economic ruin that continue to cause lasting problems that linger on in the modern day.
So sad.
It's okay.
But if imperialism was so horrible, why did nations imperialize other peoples? Were they influenced by me?
Well, for starters, Europe's Industrial Revolution had just begun in the early 1800s. Many industrial powers, including Britain, which is regarded as the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, began imperialism as a means of getting raw materials for their factories, such as cotton, coal, and rubber. Territories were also targeted for their spices, cash crops, metals, and diamonds, as they too added wealth to imperial nations. As a result, regions like Africa, India, and Southeast Asia were targeted by Europeans for their rich natural resources.
Industrial powers also had a desire to sell their excess of manufactured goods on the global stage and were willing to take whatever action necessary to gain new markets. For example, the British opened India up to foreign trade in 1813, which flooded the Indian market with cheap industrial cotton goods, making it difficult for Indian craftsmen to compete. Any local manufacturers who might have been able to compete were completely stamped out by British taxes on locally made Indian cotton goods, giving Britain control of India's domestic market, which is pretty bad if you're India.
Agricultural products were also taken away from colonies to feed growing imperial populations. Often, the colonies themselves faced huge food shortages that led to famine. For example, in the Japanese colony of Korea, due to rice exports back to Japan, a 1938 survey conducted by the Japanese colonial government in Korea found that in 1930, 1.2 million Korean families were eating boiled grass and tree bark to survive.
I don't know what you're talking about. Grass is delicious. Like, when I get my Easter basket, I don't even eat the chocolate. I just go straight for the grass.
Really? Now I have to call 911 for the third time this week. You're killing me, man. Oh my god.
This is 911. What is your emergency?
Yeah, my friend is choking on some Easter grass.
Is your friend, like, over the age of 7?
Yeah?
Yeah, sorry, hon. You're on your own.
Why me?
Okay, maybe you had a point.
Anyways, in addition to the economic incentives that were attached to imperializing foreign lands, imperial powers were also motivated to spread their so-called superior culture to their colonies. The two main schools of thought that supported imperialism were social Darwinists and white man's burdenists.
Burdenist isn't a word.
Social Darwinists based their beliefs off of a manipulated version of Charles Darwin's theory about evolution, which in and of themselves were not racist and are still largely used today, especially in the biological profession. Social Darwinists simply applied Darwin's theory to society and believed that the world's societies were in direct competition with each other. Certain peoples who had superior traits and variations, such as frugality and industriousness, would not only survive, but thrive in the world. Meanwhile, those peoples who did not have said superior traits would struggle to survive, and eventually would be eliminated from the world. They used his theories to support imperialism by claiming that people who were imperialized deserved to be imperialized since they were inherently inferior, such as African peoples, Chinese or Indians.
And people that don't eat grass.
On the other hand, white man's burdenists also believed that they were culturally superior to the peoples of their colonies. However, unlike social Darwinists, burdenists felt that it was their moral duty as faithful Christians to spread Christianity and their European culture to their colonial subjects.
They were basically just SJWs, but worse and racistier.
Yep, pretty much. Authors and so-called intellectuals wrote poems and essays in support of imperialism, like The White Man's Burden, a poem by British writer and adamant supporter of imperialism, Rudyard Kipling, who coined the term white man's burden. Who would have thunk?
That guy also wrote the Jungle Book.
Look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife. I mean the bare necessities, or Mother Nature's recipes that brings the bare necessities to life. Wherever I wander, wherever I roam, I couldn't be fonder of my big home. The bees are buzzing in the tree to make some money just for me. When you look under the rocks and plants and take a glance at the fancy
God,
ants and
why?
maybe try a few.
Listen. That movie was a masterpiece. I would rate that song over The Godfather.
Anyways, Imperial powers, Europeans especially, imperialized other countries because they wanted to spread their own culture to their colonial subjects through Christian missionaries and colonial education, which was often taught by missionaries. Missionaries taught their own European language to their colonial people so that they can then communicate with them. Eventually, over time, missionaries continued to teach local peoples their European language, culture, societal norms, and eventually Christianity. The French were especially active in converting colonial peoples, like in French Indochina, where French was the only language taught past the 3rd grade. Imperial nations spreading their own culture showed their power with lasting influence in their colonies in the form of language and religion.
Europeans also wanted big empires. The bigger your empire, the more powerful you were, and the more you controlled global affairs. European empires have historically been in fierce competition with each other for dominance, and their competitions with each other spilled over into the rest of the world in the form of imperialism. The British and French were arguably the biggest and baddest of the era's empires. However, the Germans, Dutch, Belgians, and later the United States and Japan were able to carve up expansive empires for themselves. But joke's on them, because we all know they were really just compensating for something else.
Whoa, that's not school appropriate.
What? No, I was talking about Europe's lack of culture and progress in the Middle Ages.
Oh. Anyways, colonies of these expansive empires were subjugated to a lot of unimaginable evils and ruin through economic exploitation and destruction of local cultures. It's your line, Greg.
God. The colonial peoples endured genocides, ethnicides, racism, ethnic divides, and countless human rights abuses.
Ooh, I can't wait to learn about the effects of imperialism. They all sound so evil. Do you mind if I take a few notes? I think I want to replicate this in the future.
I guess? I don't know. And we'll be covering those effects on our next video after we hire an exorcist.
How many times do I have to tell you? We don't have any money. We are literally making this in my mom's basement.
Fine. Well, then I guess we only have one way to get rid of the Dark Lord of the Shadows and increase our viewership.
No, don't.
God, you got a minute?
No.
Sure, what's up, guys? What do you want?
Satan told us she's more powerful than you.
Oh, come on. That's not a nice thing to say, man. You just gotta be friends.
I shall destroy thee.
Honestly, go ahead. I don't really care. Okay, you're gonna finish up your alcohol. Oh, shit. Oh, God. We're running with that.
Look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife. I mean the bare necessities, or Mother Nature's recipes that brings the bare necessities to life.